You carry something ancient in your psyche that most others do not recognize, and this creates a peculiar isolation that feels both painful and strangely sacred. Not everyone experiences reality through this particular lens, but those who do find themselves perpetually standing at the threshold between worlds, the modern and the timeless, the personal and the archetypal, the spoken and the unspeakable. And this is why your life has felt like a constant translation of experiences that others seem to navigate with disturbing ease. There exists a quality of awareness that operates beneath conscious recognition, and those who possess it often mistake it for alienation. You may have spent years attempting to normalize yourself, to fit the pattern, to speak the language of surfaces. But something in you refused, something deeper, something that predates your personal history. It is no accident that you feel this way. The psyche does not distribute its gifts randomly. What you experience is not pathology, it is inheritance. Through decades of studying the collective unconscious, I observed a pattern that repeated across cultures, generations, and individual case histories. Certain individuals access layers of psychic material that transcend their personal history entirely. They dream in symbols that belong to no single tradition, yet feel universally true. They recognize patterns in human behavior that seem to echo across millennia. They carry, whether they understand it or not, a particular form of ancient wisdom that flows not from books or teachers, but from the archetypal depths themselves. The collective unconscious, as I came to understand, is not merely a repository of forgotten memories. It is a living psychic inheritance containing the accumulated wisdom of human experience across time. Most people touch this layer only occasionally, in dreams or moments of christening. But some, and you may be among them, maintain a more constant connection to these depths. This connection is not chosen, it is constitutional, and it changes everything about how you experience the world. You feel it, do you not? The sense that you remember things you have never learned, the peculiar recognition when encountering certain symbols, certain truths, certain psychological patterns. Others may call this intuition or sensitivity, but what depth psychology reveals is far more specific. You are not simply sensitive, you are permeable to archetypal material in ways that most consciousness is not. What you experience as alienation from the modern world is actually attunement to something far older. The unconscious speaks in a language that predates words, and you have learned, perhaps without realizing it, to hear this language with unusual clarity. Where others see only surface events, you perceive the mythological patterns beneath. Where others accept the persona at face value, you sense the shadow lurking behind every social performance. Where others find comfort in collective beliefs, you feel the archetypal tensions those beliefs attempt to resolve. This is not superiority, this is burden and gift intertwined. The psyche operates by compensation, and those who carry depth often pay the price in loneliness. But here is where it becomes essential to understand. This loneliness is not punishment for deficiency. It is the necessary condition for certain forms of knowing. What I discovered through years of analytical work is that ancient soul wisdom reveals itself through specific psychological markers. Not everyone will recognize all of these signs, but if you find yourself nodding in recognition at several, you may be carrying something that most of modern consciousness has forgotten how to access. The first sign reveals itself in your relationship with solitude. Where once aloneness felt like punishment, something shifted. Solitude has been transformed into sanctuary, into the space where you finally stop performing and translating and can simply exist. Most people fear being alone with themselves. They fill every silence with noise, every empty moment with distraction. But you have discovered something different. In solitude, you do not shrink, you expand. According to depth psychology, this relationship with aloneness is not coincidental. The self, that organizing center of the psyche that transcends the ego, can only be encountered in withdrawal from collective consciousness. Ancient wisdom cannot be accessed while you are busy maintaining your social persona. It emerges in the quiet, in the space between thoughts, in the moments when you stop trying to be anything at all. You may have noticed that your most profound insights arrive not in conversation or stimulation, but in stillness, walking alone, sitting in silence, withdrawing from the noise of others' expectations. This is not antisocial behavior. This is the psyche creating the conditions necessary for deeper knowing to surface. The collective unconscious does not shout, it whispers, and only in silence can you hear it. What emerges second is an uncanny ability to perceive psychological patterns across time and circumstance. You watch people repeat the same archetypal dramas their parents enacted. You see civilizations cycling through patterns that mirror ancient myths. You recognize the hero's journey in a stranger's crisis, the trickster archetype in a politician's performance, the great mother in someone's desperate need to nurture or control. This pattern recognition is not learned through study, though study may refine it. It comes from direct access to the archetypal layer where these patterns live as autonomous psychic forces. Most people experience their lives as unique and unprecedented, but you see the eternal repetition, the timeless structures beneath the contemporary details. This can be exhausting. Nothing is ever simply itself. Everything points to something deeper, older, more universal. My analytical work demonstrated again and again that this capacity is both blessing and curse. It allows you to understand human behavior with penetrating accuracy, but it also makes genuine surprise nearly impossible. You have seen it all before, in different costumes, different contexts. The themes remain constant. The shadow always returns. The unlived life always demands its due. The rejected parts always come back with greater force. The third marker manifests as a visceral intolerance for superficiality. Small talk does not merely bore you, it actively drains your life force. Surface-level interaction feels like psychic suffocation. When someone speaks in cliches or hides behind social pleasantries, something in you recoils, not from judgment, but from a kind of existential claustrophobia. What the collective unconscious shows us is that this reaction is not snobbery. It is the psyche's protective response when forced into spaces too shallow to contain its depth. Consider the deep-sea creature brought suddenly to the surface. The pressure differential becomes unbearable. You are built for depth, and the shallows, though easier to navigate for most, are actually hostile territory for your particular psychic constitution. This is why so many of your relationships have felt incomplete, why parties leave you drained rather than energized, why you can spend hours alone yet feel desperately lonely in a crowd speaking of nothing. Your psyche requires a certain quality of exchange to feel nourished. Not everyone can provide this. Not everyone even understands what you are asking for when you seek real conversation, authentic encounter, depth of presence. You need not apologize for this. The need itself creates the loneliness, but it also protects you from wasting your limited energy on connections that cannot sustain your depth. Another sign appears in your relationship with the dream world, which speaks to you with unusual clarity and symbolic precision. Your dreams are not the random neurological noise that materialist psychology claims. They are coherent messages from the unconscious, arriving in the ancient language of symbol and archetype. And you can read this language. Perhaps you have noticed that your dreams often feel more real than waking life, that they leave you with insights no conscious reasoning could produce, that they predict not literal events but psychological shifts that later manifest in external circumstances. This is because the unconscious operates outside linear time. It perceives patterns before they fully crystallize in consciousness. The psyche has its own intelligence, operating beneath awareness, and it communicates through the dream. Most people forget their dreams or dismiss them as meaningless, but you pay attention, you record them, you sit with the symbols until they reveal their meaning. This is not superstition. This is engagement with the self's autonomous activity, the psyche's attempt to guide your consciousness toward greater wholeness. Through years of studying dream symbolism, one truth became clear. Those who carry ancient wisdom often receive it first through dreams. The collective unconscious deposits its treasures in the night, in images that bypass the rational mind's defenses. You are being taught by something older than your personal psychology. The question is whether you are listening. The fifth characteristic is a gravitational pull toward paradox and contradiction, finding truth in what others dismiss as confusion or inconsistency. While most seek clear answers and binary thinking, you are drawn to the places where opposites collide, good and evil intertwined, strength born from weakness, wisdom emerging from foolishness. You understand, perhaps without articulating it, that the deepest truths cannot be contained in simple formulations. Individuation, as I came to understand, requires the ability to hold tension between opposites without collapsing into one pole or the other. The psyche is not logical, it is compensatory. Whatever consciousness emphasizes, the unconscious will counterbalance. Whatever you reject will grow in the shadow. Whatever you inflate will eventually be deflated. This capacity for paradox often makes you seem inconsistent to others. How can you hold both compassion and boundaries? How can you value both solitude and connection? How can you see both the beauty and the horror without choosing sides? But this is precisely the mark of psychological maturity. The ego wants simplicity. The self embraces wholeness, which includes all contradictions. You may recognize this pattern in yourself. The moments when you defend a position, then immediately see its opposite truth. The way you can love and hate the same person without contradiction. The understanding that your greatest strengths and deepest wounds often occupy the same psychic space. This is not confusion. This is integration. What reveals itself sixth is a peculiar form of recognition when encountering certain ideas, places, symbols, or even people. They feel impossibly familiar, despite being objectively new to your personal experience. This is not mere déjà vu, that fleeting neurological glitch. This is something deeper, a resonance with archetypal patterns embedded in the collective unconscious. I recall a woman who came to me describing this exact phenomenon. She had traveled to a city she had never visited, in a country whose language she did not speak. Yet walking certain streets, she knew what would appear around each corner, not through precognition, but through recognition. The psyche, it seems, carries maps of places it has never physically been. Her conscious mind could not explain this, but her unconscious knew these streets, these patterns, these architectural forms that echo across cultures and centuries. The collective unconscious contains not only psychological patterns, but also place memories, symbol structures, and relational dynamics that transcend individual experience. When you encounter something that activates this layer, the recognition is immediate and undeniable. You do not think, "This seems familiar." You know, with absolute certainty, "I have been here before," even when all evidence says otherwise. This recognition extends beyond places to ideas and symbols. You encounter a psychological concept and realize you have always known this truth, even if you lacked words for it. You see a symbol, perhaps in art, in nature, in dream, and it speaks to you with a clarity that bypasses rational understanding. This is the self communicating through the universal language of archetype. The seventh sign emerges as an ability to observe your own psyche from a distance, maintaining awareness even in emotional storms. Most people become identified with their emotional states. When they feel anger, they are anger. When they feel despair, they are despair. But you possess something different, a witnessing consciousness that can step back and observe even your own suffering with a kind of detached compassion. The unconscious, according to depth psychology, contains not only shadow material and archetypal patterns, but also a center of awareness that transcends the ego's identifications. This is what I termed the self, the organizing principle that can observe the ego's dramas without being consumed by them. Most people access this witness consciousness only briefly, in moments of crisis or profound meditation. But those who carry ancient wisdom often maintain more constant contact with this deeper awareness. You have likely noticed this capacity in yourself during difficult times. Even in grief, part of you watches the grief. Even in rage, something remains calm at the center. Even in your darkest moments, a small voice observes and sometimes even understands the necessity of what you are experiencing. This is not dissociation. This is the self-maintaining perspective while the ego undergoes its necessary transformations. This witness consciousness is both gift and isolation. It allows you to navigate suffering without being destroyed by it. But it also creates a strange distance from your own life, as if you are simultaneously living and watching yourself live. Others may not understand this quality of double awareness, but it is precisely this capacity that allows depth to develop. The final marker is perhaps the most burdensome. You carry an inability to live without seeking and creating meaning, even when meaninglessness would be easier, more comfortable, more socially acceptable. While others can accept life at face value, you are driven by a relentless need to understand why. Why this suffering? Why this pattern? Why this particular configuration of joy and pain? What became clear through decades of observation is that this need for meaning is not philosophical luxury. It is psychological necessity for certain constitutions. The psyche that carries ancient wisdom cannot function in a meaningless universe. It will create meaning where none is obvious. It will find purpose in suffering, lessons in loss, initiation in what others call mere trauma. This can be exhausting. Sometimes you wish you could simply experience life without always asking what it means, what it teaches, how it serves your individuation. Sometimes you envy those who can shrug and say, things just happen, without needing to extract wisdom from every experience. But this need, this compulsion to make meaning, is not optional for you. It is how your psyche maintains integrity in a chaotic world. The shadow functions by compensating for consciousness, and in a culture that has lost contact with sacred meaning, someone must carry the burden of remembering that life is not random, that patterns exist, that the psyche is purposeful even when its purposes remain hidden. You are one of those carriers, and while this brings little comfort in the darkest moments, it is nonetheless true. Here is where the understanding must shift. Everything I have described, the solitude, the pattern recognition, the intolerance for superficiality, the dream wisdom, the comfort with paradox, the uncanny recognition, the witness consciousness, the need for meaning, these are not isolated traits. They form a constellation, a psychological fingerprint that marks you as someone carrying a specific form of psychic inheritance. This ancient wisdom you carry is not meant to isolate you forever. That is only the first phase, the necessary withdrawal from collective consciousness so that something deeper can emerge. The collective unconscious deposits its wisdom in individuals not for their private use alone, but for eventual return to the collective. You are being prepared, through all this loneliness, all this depth, all this uncomfortable sensitivity, for a specific role in the transformation of collective consciousness. The psyche operates through compensation. When the collective moves too far toward rationalism, materialism, surface living, the unconscious produces individuals who maintain contact with depth, symbol, and archetypal wisdom. You are one of these compensatory figures. Your alienation from mainstream consciousness is not accidental. It is purposeful. You have been positioned at the threshold between worlds so that you can eventually serve as bridge, as translator, as carrier of what the collective has forgotten but desperately needs. This does not mean you will become a teacher or guru or public figure, though some do. It means that your very presence, your refusal to live on the surface, your insistence on depth and meaning, creates a gravitational field that affects others. People sense something in you they cannot name. They are drawn to you or repelled by you, but rarely indifferent. This is because you carry something they have lost contact with, and the unconscious recognizes its own, even when the conscious mind does not. Consider the ancient role of the shaman, the mystic, the wise one who withdrew from the tribe to commune with invisible forces, then returned with healing, with prophecy, with wisdom the collective needed to survive. You are the modern version of this archetype, not in literal shamanic practice necessarily, but in psychological function. You have descended into depths most avoid. You have maintained relationship with the unconscious while others pursued only conscious goals. And this descent, this maintenance of relationship, it prepares you for return. The transformation is not about becoming more normal or learning to function better in superficial spaces. It is about accepting your role as carrier of depth in a shallow time, as guardian of meaning in an age that has declared meaning dead, as bridge between the personal and the archetypal. Your isolation was never punishment. It was initiation. And the initiation, though painful, has forged in you a capacity most never develop. You now understand that what felt like curse was preparation, and the loneliness that marked your path was necessary for the depth you now carry. The psyche does not waste suffering. Every isolation served to deepen you. Every moment of feeling misunderstood strengthened your relationship with your own inner authority. Every time you chose depth over belonging, you were choosing the self over the ego's need for comfort. This ancient wisdom you carry, it lives in you now not as abstract knowledge, but as embodied truth. You know things not because you learned them, but because you have lived them. You understand the psyche's patterns not through theory, but through direct encounter with your own depths. And this knowing, this hard-won wisdom, it cannot be taken from you. It has become constitutional, woven into the fabric of your being. The world desperately needs what you carry, even if it does not know how to ask for it. In a time of increasing fragmentation, you offer wholeness. In a time of surface obsession, you carry depth. In a time when the collective has lost contact with the archetypal realm, you maintain the bridge. This is not grandiosity. This is acknowledgement of function, of purpose, of the role the psyche has been preparing you to occupy. You are ready now, or becoming ready, to stop apologizing for your depth, your sensitivity, your need for meaning and authentic connection. The isolation that once felt like exile can now be recognized as preparation, and the ancient wisdom that has been flowing through you, perhaps unrecognized, can now be consciously claimed and consciously offered to a world that has forgotten how to access its own depths. The journey does not end here. Individuation is lifelong, and new layers will always reveal themselves, but you now possess something most never gain: conscious relationship with the archetypal wisdom that flows through you. You know what you carry, you understand why your path has been different, and you can choose from this moment forward to stop trying to normalize yourself and instead to honor the sacred burden and gift you were born to bear. This is your inheritance. This is your calling. This is who you have always been, beneath the attempts to fit in, to be understood, to make yourself smaller so others could feel comfortable. You are not meant to be comfortable. You are meant to be deep. And the world, whether it knows it or not, is waiting for what only you can bring from those depths you have learned to navigate. The ancient wisdom speaks through you now. Listen to it. Trust it, and when you are ready, offer it back to the collective that needs what you have suffered to obtain.